They call it an October surprise, but you know who did see this coming or something like it? Kinda? Donald Trump. This is what he had to say way back in August of 2015.
Think of it. So it's coming through Uma. She's got a lot of stuff, a lot of information. Who knows? So she's married to a bad guy. I know Anthony Weiner for a long time. I knew before they caught him with the bing, 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 right? And he was a bad guy then. It turned out that he was a really bad guy. So she's married to Anthony Weiner. Do you think there's even a 5% chance that she's not telling Anthony Weiner, now of a public relations firm, what the hell is coming across? Do you think there's even a little bit of a chance? I don't think so.
Interesting question. Let's bring in some soothsayers of our own. David Axelrod, CNN senior political commentator, and Mark McKinnon, former strategist to George W. Bush and John McCain and co-creator of The Circus on Showtime. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. Mark, let me start with you. Do you think this Comey announcement on Friday could actually change the outcome of the race?
Well, you never want a big sort of crisis-like story to break in the last couple of weeks of a campaign. I remember in 2000 when the DWI story broke on George W. Bush, and we were up 3 or 4 points, and as everyone recalls, that ended up in a runoff decided by 500 votes. So momentum is everything in the last days of a campaign. Clinton was obviously, I mean, everybody was saying last week that this thing was baked. It was Clinton's to lose, barring an asteroid hitting the Earth, and an asteroid hit the Earth when James Comey came out with this announcement on Friday.
And David, how do you think Clinton and her team should be handling this news? They seem to be focusing very much on Comey.
Well, I'd say 2 things. One is they're focusing on Comey. You know, it's interesting to hear these discussions. You made the exact right point, Jake, which is that Trump has spent, and his campaign has spent a year sort of sullying all institutions, including the FBI. No one has mentioned the fact that he hasn't accepted the FBI's conclusion that the Russians hacked into the DNC. So he's been dismissive of the FBI, and now he holds it up. And I think that they're right to raise questions about the procedure now because there's such skepticism in the environment, and Trump has helped create it. But I also think they're going to have to get tougher on Trump in the final week than they probably planned to do. They were coming in for a gentle landing, and now I think you're going to see them challenging Trump both in their media and in her comments from now to the end.
Yeah,
and Mark, go, yeah.
Well, I just was going to agree with David in the sense that we kind of thought a long time ago that at the end of this race, strategically, the Trump campaign would want to make it a referendum on Clinton, and Clinton would want to make it a referendum on Trump, and that's exactly what's happening right now. I went out to see Joe Biden Saturday in Las Vegas, and I was wondering, was he going to talk about the emails? What was he going to do? I'll tell you what he did: attack, attack, attack. They're going total offense on Donald Trump right now.
And what would you, Mark? What would you tell the Trump campaign to do? Focus just on the emails and go nuclear in this last week? Well,
I mean, the problem with the Trump campaign all along is that they've had lots of potential material, a lot of grist for the mill that he has failed to prosecute. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff out of the WikiLeaks information, the Clinton Foundation, and now now all this Comey information. I mean, we obviously don't know what it is, but it raises the whole question that everybody's had all along about trust, transparency, privacy with Hillary Clinton. That's what people's concerns are about. So there aren't a lot of people left on the fence right now, but to the extent that they are, this could be a problematic issue. So Trump needs to just, for once, maintain a clear and constant focus for the next 10 days on the issues that can move the dial.
David, let's talk about Election Day. We don't know yet how this FBI news will affect the race. But earlier this week, Clinton ally Ed Rendell, the former governor of the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, warned that there could be what he calls an undervote for Donald Trump. Take a listen.
I think there's a hidden Donald Trump vote, like there was a hidden Frank Rizzo vote. And I think all this talk about it being over and now the real contest is the Senate, I think that's going to persuade a couple of Hillary Clinton voters and Democratic voters to say, well, what do I have to stand on line for an hour for? If I were the Clinton team, I would be desperately worried about that type of talk. Desperately worried.
That was before the Comey news broke. What do you think, David? What is the game plan for the Clinton team? Should they go nuclear on Donald Trump on air?
Well, yeah, I think they will go nuclear, but they're very focused on mobilization as they should be, and they've built a better organization than Donald Trump. So if this is in fact a close election, they should have an advantage there. The thing about the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I understand that one of the reasons it's great, Jake, is because your home state, is that the thing I would worry about if I were them is turnout in Philadelphia and whether there'll be, you know, in some of these early voting states, the African American turnout has been considerably less than 2012. So that would be a concern. Now, maybe if the race appears to be close, that will help spur turnout. You made the point before that we really don't know now what impact this will have. It's not good for Clinton that this is all we're talking about today. On the other hand, how much of this is priced into the stock? Mark mentions the drunken driving story about Bush. That was new information in 2004. There's nothing here that's particularly new. And so the question is, does it impact the race or not? And we won't know for several days when we look at polling sort of midweek, has this really shifted the race? But if the perception is that it's closer, it may spur Trump voters, but it may also make Clinton voters who are somewhat ambivalent or somewhat complacent feel like they need to get out to the polls. And that's something that they will push, I'm sure.
Mark, as you know, Karl Rove's theory about that DUI news in October 2000 is that it suppressed evangelical voters, and that's one of the reasons why he thinks that the final popular vote was off poll predictions. How do you think this might impact votes? I've heard it speculated that maybe those individuals who were not Hillary Clinton fans but were going to hold their noses and vote for her, college-educated white men, blue-collar women, that they might not vote for her or not vote at all. What do you think?
Well, I agree with your really smart guy on TV there, David Axelrod. Most of it's not new information. Most of this is baked into the cake. For a lot of voters, it's just kind of white noise. It's, you know, women on the Trump side coming out with more stories, more email on the other side on the Clinton story. So it's not like new information that may move a lot of votes. But I think the thing that is important that I'm struck by, that David kind of touched on, is that this may really place an even greater emphasis on the the targeting and turnout operation, which the Clinton campaign has spent a lot of time and money on, and not nearly as much on the Trump side. So I remember in August when Clinton kind of was off the trail raising money, and Trump criticized her for being off the trail, and that was the time when he kind of rose in the polls, as you recall, because he was out there kind of dominating the media. But that's when she raised a lot of money, and it occurred to me back then that she might have a real advantage in these last couple of weeks on the money side, which will now translate into a lot of targeting and turnout. And, you know, I think about the last FEC reports that I saw that had, you know, Trump spending 3 times as much money on hats as he is in turnout, and that's the kind of thing that may make the difference in the last couple of weeks in a race that's gotten close because of this developing news.
And David, Donald Trump said on Friday that he would write himself a check for $10 million. Take a listen.
Today I wrote another check for $10 million. I'm spending money like crazy. I'll probably have over, maybe close to or over, $100 million of my money spent on the campaign.
And David, Trump might be writing his campaign a $10 million check, but that won't change the fact that he's at a huge disadvantage when it comes to money. Clinton has $62 million cash on hand Friday. Trump only had $16 million.
You know, the money that matters is the earlier money that you can invest in things like analytics and building a turnout machine. This money can go to late mobilization efforts. It can go to television. But I don't know how meaningful it is. We'll also see, you know, how much he ends up actually spending of his own. He's sort of turned this into a money-making exercise as well. So he's been throwing those numbers around for a long time. But bottom line, I think the late money is less important than the money that he should have spent earlier to kind of build the operation that he'll need in the case of a close election.
Mark McKinnon and David Axelrod, thank you so much. David, good luck to your Cubbies, my friend.
Yeah, man, we need it. Thank you.
You sure do. Let me ask you a question about health care. There are real questions about whether Donald Trump understands how Obamacare works. Take a listen to what Mr. Trump had to say in Florida.
All of my employees are having a tremendous problem with Obamacare. You folks, this is another group. Is that a correct statement? I mean, you look at what they're going through with their health care is horrible because of Obamacare.
Now, after he gave that statement, the general manager of Trump's property attempted to correct the record, and he said 99% of Trump's employees are insured through the hotel, meaning they have private insurance. How can Mr. Trump be the one to replace Obamacare if he doesn't really seem to even understand how it works?
He does understand. His employees are the lucky ones, Jake. They actually don't have to suffer under Obamacare, but he's actually talking about the rest of the country, so many who have. He's the right person to repeal and replace it because Obamacare is an unmitigated disaster. It reminds us all how intrusive, invasive, expensive, and expansive the federal government can become in our lives under the guise of helping people. He was in Arizona yesterday and clearly told them their premiums are expected to rise in Arizona by 116%. Will CNN or anybody else ask Mrs. Clinton that today when she's visiting Arizona? We see these other premium people are opening up their mailboxes and clicking onto their computers and getting notice that their premiums are about to explode. It is reprehensible and deplorable, to coin a phrase, that Americans are now choosing between paying the rent, feeding their families, and keeping their health care. President Obama lied 26 or 27 times by telling people, if you want to keep your doctor, you can keep your doctor. No, you can't. People see a lack of quality, a lack of access, a lack of control, and an increase in price in something that's under the guise of the, quote, Affordable Care Act. The question for Hillary Clinton is, what would you do about it? Is Obamacare 3.0 in the offing, or would you go and try to mollify the Bernie Sanders supporters who actually want us to move to single-payer system? Either way, she should own Obamacare. She should be asked what she would do about it. Donald Trump says he would let you compete across state lines to buy your health insurance, much the way you could buy your auto insurance and other goods and services. He would block grant Medicaid to the states. He would immediately, through his tax plan, remove the Obamacare penalty, which is hurting many people. And he, of course, would allow a more patient-centric healthcare system, which would give us all health savings accounts so that you own and you can control your own healthcare spending. What we've got is not working, and I'm very glad that Obamacare continues to form the core of his message, even in light of the new FBI investigation. We've had a great week, in large part because Mr. Trump is talking about Obamacare.
I agree. I would love to ask Hillary Clinton that question. The Clinton campaign has not made her available to me since June, and the Trump campaign has not made Mr. Trump available to me since June. But so as part of this Judicial Watch lawsuit, Huma Abedin had to testify under oath, and she said, quote, I looked for all the devices that may have had any of my State Department work on it and returned, gave them to my attorneys for them to review for all relevant documents, and gave them devices and paper. Obviously, this other computer was not included in that group. Have you asked Huma Abedin why she did not turn over this computer that is now being reviewed by the FBI?
Look, I think Huma's been completely cooperative with the authorities, and they've recognized that. She's worked with her attorneys to turn over relevant material. But we don't know what this is all about, really. So it's very hard.
But, John, she hasn't been completely cooperative if she didn't turn over every device that had State Department emails on them, and this one computer did.
I think it's clear that she complied to the best of her ability to turn everything over that she had in her possession. I don't know anything more than the speculation that's running wild in the press now about what this is about. I've talked to her.
Have you talked to her? Have you asked Huma Abedin what is on that computer and why she didn't turn it over when she said she had divided all the devices?
We don't know what computer Mr. Comey is talking about. You're assuming a lot of facts that we don't know. So I think that, as I said, she's been fully cooperative with the authorities, and they have recognized that. And I think that we could sit here and speculate and put facts into the record based on.
I'm not speculating, sir.
Reports.
Our reporting is that it was a laptop computer that belonged to Anthony Weiner, and they found State Department emails on that laptop. That's reporting. That's not speculation. You have access to Huma Abedin. I don't. Have you asked her how this happened?
I don't think she knows anything more than what we've seen in the press to date. So, I'm sure if people. If proper authorities want to ask her questions, they'll ask her questions, but she's been fully cooperative in this investigation.
Has anyone in the government provided you with a status report, John, on the investigation into your hacked and stolen emails?
No, I've talked to the the FBI at the beginning of this, and my attorney has been in touch with them. It's part of the investigation of the Russian hacks, but the scope of it, who knew what when, the fact that the Trump campaign seems to have been in contact with Julian Assange and from WikiLeaks quite early, at least as early as August. I don't know what their investigation
the Trump
is
campaign.
finding.
You're referring to Roger. Are you referring to
I'm
Roger
talking
Stone
to Roger
saying
Stone.
that he
Trump confidant?
Okay.
Let me correct myself.
Okay.
A Trump confidant, Roger Stone, who bragged about being in touch with Julian Assange and talked about the fact that that they were going to come after me. He did that back in August. So what the government has learned about the interactions between Assange and the Russians, it seems clear that the Russians were the ones who did the initial hack, how they got to WikiLeaks, what the relationship was with Roger Stone. I don't know. I assume that the government's looking at that, but I don't know anything more. Maybe Jim
right.
Comey, if he thinks it's important, will come out and let us know in the next 9 days.